as John Lloyd told me a couple of days ago when we were chatting about this week, he said to me, what's the worst that can happen? It could be a disaster. Now, of course, that gave me serious pause, but then I really thought about it, and I thought, wait, I can take that. If we take into account the extraordinary circumstances from which we've just emerged, the fact that what's the worst that could happen? You could fall asleep in your chair. I could flub my lines. I could forget, I don't know. I could, for example, here, like I'm basically becoming tongue-tied. That's the worst thing that can happen. So without further ado, I want to welcome my first guest, John Lloyd, unarguably the UK's top comedy producer, and I did not rehearse that line. And I'm very happy to introduce John because on a very personal note, he was introduced to me by the person I consider the patron saint and biggest cheerleader of the festival, a man named Andrew Sunnox, who many of you actually know and is seated in the audience today. And it was thanks to Andrew's introduction that I met John, and actually Andrew was the spark that lit the fire under my butt to actually go ahead with this thing. And he said, you have to meet John because he has this crazy, voracious, undying curiosity. And I think that you will find him incredibly inspiring. And that has remained true until today. And I've actually spent about 4 or 5 hours getting to know John on Zoom calls. And I would say that one of the biggest windfalls of doing the entire festival has been getting to know him and becoming a good friend. I hope I could say that fairly. But to go on with his bio. When John was at Cambridge and met Jeff Probert and Charles Hadencave, who are 2 audience members today, he met his future work partner, Douglas Adams, and together they created The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Since then, he has created some of Britain's most loved TV and radio shows, including Spitting Image, Blackadder, The News Quiz, and QI. Most recently, in 2011, he co-created the Museum of Curiosity on Radio 4, which he still presents today. He has won numerous awards, including 10 BAFTAs, only 1 less than Judi Dench. Not surprisingly, he was awarded a CBE for his services to broadcasting in 2011. So without further ado, please, John, please join me on stage. So John, on the subject of the BAFTAs, you told me that there was a weird backstory to that you would be happy to share with the audience. So on that note, what about that?
So I have won 10 BAFTAs, which is a ridiculous number, but except, I say 1 less than Dame Judy. But you can't find this recorded anywhere because the 4 first ones, that's Not the 9 O'Clock News, Blackadder, that kind of stuff, and a kind of lifetime award. And the 6 other ones were one year in the early 90s. The way award ceremonies work is that each table costs a huge amount of money, and if you're in advertising, each ad you submit for submission, you have to pay 500 quid for. So BAFTA thought, we'll get in on this and we'll have a BAFTA Advertising Awards. So they took the Royal Albert Hall, and of course, because it was BAFTA, every advertising agency in the world submitted ads because it was proper kudos. Royal Albert Hall was absolutely full, and that night, I won 6 BAFTAs on the same night. By the time the 4th one came up, the whole Albert Hall was booing. It's quite an experience to be booed by the Albert Hall, I tell you. And it was just one of those things. It was just a lucky year the year before. And one of the things was that because I was so astounded and happy, I gave away all my BAFTAs to all the advertising agencies and clients. So I don't have any of those. But should we show them
That
one?
kind of exemplifies John's entire attitude that he would be showered with these incredible awards and yet give away all of the statuary at the end. So actually, because of the outrageousness and the absurdity of so much of your humor, which obviously caught fire and led to these incredibly iconic TV shows, how would you say that the television scene or humor has changed and evolved in the last, I don't know, since you started making comedy? I hate to ask a serious question, but
Well, I mean, a lot of people say, you can't. We were talking about this last night with Andrew. It's can you make jokes about anything anymore? I mean, the joke I've just told you probably is, in certain quarters considered offensive. Although people of a certain age probably wouldn't find it offensive. Maybe they would. I don't know. It's difficult. I'm just very glad I'm not in satire now. It's sort of gone beyond satire, hasn't it? The world and. So when I was producing Spitting Image, for example, you seem to be able to say things and do things that people understood that it was a joke. There's a thing that happened particularly online is the internet doesn't get irony at all. If you make a joke that's meant to, you said you're mocking something, people take it seriously, and then you get sort of spammed and deluged with stuff. But it's sort of not my area, really. I don't really do popular culture. QI's about the universe and about ancient history and all that, maths, that kind of stuff. So it's difficult to make an offensive maths joke, I think. I'm struggling to think, but I'm sure there is one.
Is that the reason you actually went in the direction of QI? Or was it because of some personal circumstances which led to the creation or just the spark of inspiration for QI? Was it because comedy had changed in this dramatically different direction, was making it less attractive for you personally? Or was it because, we've talked about your depression, for example, and that was its pivotal episode of your life, which led to a completely different channel of creativity?
Yeah, so I was very, I suppose, ambitious as a young guy in radio and then in television, and just conventionally, I want to do things well, and it's nice to win prizes, it's nice to be recognised, and I just won the most ridiculous number of prizes, including, as I say, those 10 BAFTAs, and when I was 38, I won 2 Lifetime Awards in the same year, one from BAFTA and one from the Royal Television Society, and the one at BAFTA, it was the happiest day of my life because my wife was there and she was pregnant, and we're going to have our first child. My son Harry is playing tomorrow. And 2 years later, I was sitting under my desk crying, drinking too much whiskey and so on, because I woke up on Christmas Eve 1993 and I couldn't see the point of anything. I know it's ridiculous, and I thought it was ridiculous because I had everything. I had awards, I had a room full of awards, I had plenty of money because I was shooting ads, I had a couple of kids, I had a wonderful flat in London, a country cottage, and 2 cars. And, if you're trained in that thing, you've got to come top, as a scholar at school, you've got to win, you've got to get to Cambridge, and you sort of think when you're a child, if I can just get the maths O-level, it'll be great. Or if I can just get in the first 15, or I can just get to university. But life's not like that. It's like a video game, Just as you think you've got the top score, and it goes, bip, 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 welcome to level 2. And it gets harder, And this is a compliment of life. The harder it gets, the better you're doing. It doesn't get any easier. I don't know, maybe you have had different life experience to me, but I don't find it gets any easier. So I had this weird experience of going around the world shooting beer commercials and Barclaycard ads and having the life of Riley in a way and being very well paid, and rushing back in the evenings and reading Spinoza and Heidegger and Nietzsche, because my quest was to discover, is there more to life than he who dies with the most toys wins? Because that's what I'd been taught up to that point, is as long as you're top and you're winning and you've got the best house in the road, that's what you're supposed to do. So I spent 10 years reading and shooting ads, and then one day it occurred, I was going to write a novel. That was my next thing in the late 90s. And I sat down with a blank sheet of paper, and suddenly the top of my head opened like a boiled egg, and into it came this idea. It's called QI. It stands for quite interesting. It's the opposite of IQ. It's a different way of thinking. And the mantra of QI is everything in the universe, without exception, is interesting if looked at long enough, close enough, or from the right angle. Completely mad idea, and I thought, and it's going to have It'll have bookshops, it'll have a GCSE, it'll have a university chair, it'll have educational videos, it'll have an advertising thing, it'll have conferencing. It kept coming for like 2 hours, and I rang my best friend Alex, who is a banker and a financial guy, and he's completely different to me, Alex. You know, he's like sane and sensible and understands money and is terribly nice, never gets stressed. And so I rang him up and said, can we have lunch? I've just had an idea. And so, because I thought that if me being a loony and Alex being a sane person both liked the same idea, it was probably going to work. So we had lunch and I explained the whole idea to him over an hour. And he said, I'll take 20%. I said, that's great. So you're going to give me some money? He said, no, I'm not going to give you some help. And so for 3 months, he, as a banker, when he could, he researched starting a QI television station. It didn't come to anything. But anyway, here we are 20 years later, nearly, with, we haven't quite filled in all the boxes, but we do television, we do radio, the Museum of Curiosity. We have anyone heard the podcast No Such Thing as a Fish? Anybody under a certain age will know it. It's one of the top 3 podcasts in the country. It's fantastically good. I commend it. If you've never heard a podcast at all, that's the one to start with. And they do live tours. They've toured the States. They've toured all the capitals of Europe. They've filled the Sydney Opera House. Just 4 completely anonymous young QI researchers. So something's working. And it's a thing that I wish I could have all of you come and work at QI for 3 weeks to see that it completely changes the way you look at things.
Actually, it sounds like a good recipe for primary education, actually. It's a kind of curiosity and giving the spark to young minds to inquire beyond the received wisdom of the internet or social media or Wikipedia. I mean, I think that's actually the main reason that Andrew originally introduced you to me, because he knew that we were on the same wavelength. And on that note, and by the way I'm going to comport myself and conduct these interviews is, in some way, I will be ricocheting from one apparent non sequitur to another. But it's because John and I agree that life is so precious, time is so precious, that we want to just cut through all of like the elegant transitions between topics. And on that note, I want to ask John, how would you actually change education? Because when you talk about QI, I think it basically opens up, this is a giant question mark about how do we inspire young minds? How do we inspire people our own age?
Well, you basically leave them alone, because they come out inspired and interested in everything, and we beat it out of them. That's the truth. You know, and Charles Haddon Cave here is the only person who enjoyed having things beaten out of him at school. But the thing is, so if I had to express my philosophy broadly, I can do it in an acronym, a 5-letter acronym, which is ITOWOO. It's the other way up. Okay, this is an incredibly useful thing for you in your ordinary lives. It's like see the other person's point of view, suddenly go, oh yeah, I get it, I see, rather than me thinking all about me all the time. So ITOWOO, until Copernicus and Galileo came along, everybody thought, well, it's perfectly obvious. You're standing on the Earth and the sun comes up, doesn't it, in the morning in the east and goes overhead and goes down in the west. And Copernicus comes along and thinks, but if it was the other way up, in other words, the sun is relative to us static and the world is revolving towards us, how would you know the difference? And for several decades, somebody thought it was ridiculous. And then they worked it out. That's right. So some of you may know your eyes, when light hits the retina, it actually hits it upside down. And the brain turns the image the right way up. And you can actually buy glasses that will do the opposite. It will turn the image upside down. And after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, the brain goes, hang on, I'm being tricked here. And it goes, boop, and it goes upside down. So a lot of things in life are solved by what they call inversion. And one of them is the way a QI school would work is what we think is that education is all about answers. But good education is all about questions. That's what drives science. Scientists go, why is that? Why? It's the same with art. An artist doesn't have answers. They're looking for a new question all the time. And I always say to the young QI researchers, any fool can find answers. You can look them up on Wikipedia. But finding a new question That's real genius. And that's what everybody, all the geniuses do, the Mozarts and the Einsteins, they ask new questions. So in education, Phyllis Diller, the comedian, said, we spend the first 12 months of our children's lives, how does it go? I'll have to leave the Phyllis Diller quote for a minute. But children all ask questions all the time, as you know. They drive you mad with their questions. Look, Daddy, a leaf, what's this? You know, a pebble. Oh, shut up, will you shut up, for Christ's sake? Harry, who's playing tomorrow, was somebody who sort of drove this frustration in me, because we'd be going, when he was tiny, like 3 or whatever, going to nursery school in the morning, holding his little hand, he'd say, Daddy, who's that man? What man? The man, what, the man getting into the car? Well, I don't know, it's just some bloke. He said, why is he getting into the car, Dad? Well, he's probably going to work, Kaz. Why is he going to work, Dad? Jesus Christ. Well, you know, he's obviously got to work to earn money. And Harry says, well, why does he need to earn money, Dad? Just, for Christ's sake. See, he has to earn money, Harry, to buy food, otherwise his wife and children will all starve and die. Okay? And Harry goes, Dad, yes, why do things want to live? You know what? I mean, children are asking all these questions all the time, but usually at the time we have children, we're in the peak of our career, we're busy all the time, get to bed, you know, get on, shut up, Mummy and I are having a drink now, all that stuff. And so we miss all these extraordinary questions. And the extraordinary imagination. Another thing Harry said was, Dad, you know you're always saying if you watch so much television you'll get square eyes. I said, yes. He said, why don't they make an eye-shaped television?
I love that one. That was
and because I was free and I was a commercials director at the time, so I had time to think about these things, and it just astonished me that they... So another question, Harry, was, Dad, why is there something and not nothing? This is one of the hugest questions of physics and philosophy, first asked by Gottfried Leibniz in the 18th century, the guy who invented calculus, co-invented it with Newton. Children do these things all the time, and we miss that. So the thing is, education should work so that children are encouraged to ask questions, not told to shut up and sit down, which is the way effective 90% of teachers, I would reckon, are mainly keeping order and mainly trying to read from the ring binder and so on. And the great ones are going, that's a great question. I don't know, let's find out. And so the journey of my life has been from Mr. Cleverclogs at school, you know, senior scholar, get to Cambridge, you know, you think, obviously I know I'm not a genius, but other people seem to think that I deserve an A for this. I don't think I did, but, and of basically being good at quizzes and all that kind of stuff. And then in this midlife crisis, the first thing that happened was I thought, I don't know anything. I don't know what the difference between an atom and a molecule is. You all obviously all do. Of course you do. I didn't know really what a galaxy was. And I was just appalled that I was ignorant, the shame of not knowing anything. And now I am the professor of ignorance at Southampton University and very proud of it. Because they often ask me, several universities said, would I be professor of comedy? And I said, look, I've been doing this for nearly 50 years and I still don't know how comedy works. I do not know how a joke works, but I know a great deal about ignorance. And it's so relaxing, you know you don't know anything, you don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to win. You can listen to other people go, that's a great idea, I didn't know that. So it's highly commended.
Now, John, on a really simple, practical, brass tacks basis, and also so that everyone can also leave feeling like, oh, wow, this is amazing, I'm going to apply it to my real life. What would you say give the audience and me some guidance about how to maintain a vibrant intellectual and mental life? Like literally, what do you do every day? What have you been reading, for example? Or are there some habits which you actually stick to as a matter of principle in order to keep yourself on your toes and not become lazy? Because you were saying, we take for granted, we don't try to define galaxy. We don't try to know the difference between an atom or a molecule. I mean, what do you do, for example, on a daily basis or a weekly basis?
It's mainly whiskey, actually, that keeps me going. No, I don't. It's a big question. I don't know. I just think it's. What are the principles? One of the things that we worry too much is what other people think about us, I think, which I used to worry about a lot. And if you stop worrying about that and you just who you are, you find a better connection with people. I think for all of us, many of us, lockdown has thrown a few things into focus. You know, particularly in the dark days, whoever thought that food would be that important, you know, to be able to buy food? Whoever thought that a van driver would be somebody who would earn your respect for working in conditions of considerable danger? And it gets down to the bedrock. When you get down to the bedrock, what really matters, you know? Because all your who's who entry, you know, if you're diagnosed with a fatal disease, the fact you're deputy chairman of this and head of that really doesn't matter anymore. And I know all these things, the trouble with philosophy, they all sound like cliches. Your health is the most important thing you have, you know. You want to live life to the full and, you know, things that matter, friendship, that matters a lot. Status, nah, that's ridiculous. Learning to treat everybody regardless of their supposed rank equally. It's something that, again, Harry and I share. We worked out years ago. It comes from QI. Everything about QI gives you the secret of life, really, which is all the researchers at QI, you'd think they'd be very arrogant because they know so much, but actually they've become more modest with every passing year because the more you research, the less you know. You know, if you research any subject, you will never get to the bottom of it. So you get less judgmental. You stop thinking you know things. And if the same is true of a tortoise, for example, or a turtle, or a telegraph pole, all the things we're researching for the tea series, it's even more true of a tea subject. Anyone seen Clarkson's farm? Yeah?
Caleb's.
So it's an extraordinary thing that this sort of kid farmer, who's a sort of yokel really, but he's so funny and bright, and he knows much more about farming than Clarkson does, and belittles him and makes him feel ashamed and demeans him. And it's absolutely marvellous, because here's a guy who's a world-famous, incredibly rich celebrity being bested by this person that, you know, you wouldn't look at in the supermarket. And that's where I want to be, which is everybody, without exception, is a genius or a potential genius. And everybody's nice inside, underneath the judgment you have. Oh, that I don't like them, they're fat. I don't like them, they're old. You know, I don't like them, they're foreign. It's a terrible waste of life. And so what I like to do is talk to absolutely everybody, and everybody's fascinating. Because as I say, if a tortoise is interesting, a person is, you know, orders of magnitude more interesting than that. And people aren't interested enough. They don't question enough. They think they get to a point where they think they know what they like and they know who they are.
Now, John, I got one more question, which is related very much to what you were saying, because it was the one thing we wanted to talk about that I don't want to forget, which is the concept of service, which your remarks already have, you know, you're segueing into this subject before we take some questions from the audience. So tell us more about that. What does that mean? And how you apply it to your life?
Well, again, it's the other way up. You know, you think most of us are blundering through life thinking, why it's so unfair? Why don't I have more of this? Why is their house nicer than mine? You know, why are they prettier than me? All those things. And it's, you need to reverse that out, actually. And helping, there's a really peculiar thing about altruism. It's really good for you. The nicer you are to me, this is why I talk to everyone all the time. You know,
that's why you give everybody a chance.
If you're nice, if you turn up and you're grumpy and angry all the time and resentful, guess what kind of people you meet? Grumpy, angry, resentful ones. You know, people who are unfriendly, who don't smile. If you turn up cheerful all the time and make jokes and treat everyone as if, even though they voted a completely different way to you in Brexit, that they are actually a sane person who has interests in common that you have yet to find out. And that has been fantastic for me. It's helped me a lot in the crises, even with Trump, you know. Because people are, I believe everybody basically a good person underneath, but they've sort of got these sort of prejudices on top, which they don't even really believe, but they sort of parrot them. And the service thing is, you know, how about treating other people nicely. And I can certainly say that if you're in a job which serves people, like people in hospitality, they love serving people. There's an old Chinese saying, if you want happiness for a lifetime, help the younger generation. And, I often used to think about, that parents often say, you treat this place, particularly teenagers, you treat this place like a bloody hotel. And I say, if you behaved like you were running a hotel, you wouldn't have this problem. If you treat your children with respect and kindness rather than go to your room, don't you speak to your mother like that. You will eat your broccoli. I don't have to eat it because I'm your father, but you will eat it. It's upside down. I wish that QI is a very happy and well-run company because everybody in it is engaged and they believe in what they do and they're properly paid and everybody's treated with friendly respect and encouragement. And I wish that I'd been a parent first rather than a parent after, rather, I'd run the company because that's the way to deal with children. Everyone's told it's about telling them what to do and ordering them about and setting boundaries and all that. It's not about that. It's about encouragement and love. And of course the parent should be in the service of the child. And it works, the service thing works it's hard to grasp in a few sentences, but it works for me.
Okay, that was a great answer. Okay, on that note, we'd like to take some questions from the audience. If anybody has some, we're going to pass the mic around.
If they could be funnier than my talk, that would be great.
Okay.
It's not a funny question. It's just something I do sometimes think about. Is it an English, particularly English phenomenon, what you've been describing, this inability to bring children up in an open way, the school system, the private school system, etc., etc. Can we blame this to some extent on our culture here, or is it universal?
I don't really know the answer to that. I think that another Itowu, other way up thing, we think of the Mabuti, the pygmies of the Central Africa or Eskimos, as being primitive people. They ain't. It's like because hunter-gatherer societies, basically they don't have any hierarchies. There are no bishops. There are no people ordering people about. The pygmies sit down in a circle and solve disputes, because there obviously are some, by negotiation and principally by humour. They laugh people out of it. People see the funny side and they give each other a hug and it goes on. There's no ownership. People pick fruit from the trees and go and chase squirrels or whatever they eat. And actually they're much more advanced than we are, because all we are is, it all comes from the invention of farming in 14,000 years ago, where, because of the Ice Age, suddenly there's not enough land, so people they want to own some of it. Farming is a complete disaster. And then, clocks is another thing. The Industrial Revolution and the invention and marking is another one, by the way, invented in 1793 by a rather lazy chemistry tutor at Cambridge called Farish, who worked out that rather than talk to people and explain the subject, if he just gave them a mark, between 1 and 100, he could process 10 times as many students, because he was paid on piecework. And marking is a terrible idea, because marking is not about understanding. It's about coming best, rather than, you've all done very well, have a prize. That's what it should be like. It's like we're all competing against each other, when what we should be doing is joining together to solve problems, which are outside of ourselves. Is unifying people rather than dividing them. Sorry, it's not, but the Germans, of course, are not better than we are, obviously.
Would you be pro-competition?
Which one?
Well, competition in anything. I mean, people strive against one another to do better.
Well, it's entertaining to watch, but I think it's a mistake. The competition should be against oneself, and God knows that's hard enough, if you think how your own personality limits you. Can you get down to things all the time? Are there things you don't understand that you'd like to be able to, but you simply can't? Whatever it is, rewire a plug, change a carburetor, get down to the essay you're meant to be writing. And that's the real mark of achievement is can you fulfill your potential rather than beating the fat guy in the rugby team, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a distraction from what I believe the journey is. The journey of a person is to become the person they truly can, rather than to think they're doing well because they're beating the next person. That's kind of pathetic, isn't it? Because there's always somebody who's cleverer than you, richer than you, handsomer than you. You waste your life doing that thing. And when you meet I was a painter and decorator in my gap year. Best job I ever had, Essex builder. So I was a teenager in Essex down near Chelmsford. And I worked for Mac, the local builder. And I was, obviously you can imagine with my accent, teased like hell for the first couple of months. Long hair, dirty toff hippie, But these guys, they became my best friends, and I really loved them. They were all part-time firemen, and that's one part of where my sort of social views come from is working class people are not stupid. If you have worked with, a chippy and an electrician and a plumber and watched them rewire a house, you think these guys are blooming geniuses. I can do any of that stuff. And they're funny and they're clever and they're wise and they beat me in every argument I ever had. Although I was going to Cambridge that year. But it gets around that working class people, they're not very bright. They are all very bright. They may not know much about Greek philosophy or non-Euclidean geometry. It doesn't matter at all. It's like, so that's what I mean about equality, but it gets around, and we've all got those prejudices, and taking your point, Nella, early on about, I don't know how the Germans or the Japanese bring up their children particularly, but every nation in the world, as far as I know, is racially prejudiced. We're all racist, we're all nationalists, everybody. So, Harry's girlfriend, Leanne, is Dutch, and the thing is, the Dutch think the English are pretty weird, You think that the Dutch? I thought the Dutch were unjudgmental. No, you're pretty weird, actually. Everybody hates the people next door. It's the most peculiar thing. Not hates, but we look down on the French, and the French look down on us. Well, actually, they don't really, and we don't really look down on the French. It's just we think we do. Oh, hello, Emma.
Okay, this is the last question.
Oh, lucky you. Pressure, no pressure.
So do you think then, up until today, you saying to become the person you want to, sorry, scary. Do you think you've become the person you could have been? Looking back just from today, you say it's about where you can be yourself rather than competing against other people.
No, I'm a work in progress, but I started very late, I started it only occurred to me at the age of 42 that I maybe wasn't doing it quite right, because the world said I was. The world kept giving whatever I did. It was the same with A-levels, I was convinced I failed all my A-levels, and I got, 3 A's and an A star or something. I thought, why? I didn't think I was at all clever or certainly not knowledgeable. And that went all through my life, all through my working life, and kept getting prizes. So the first ad I directed was I was 37, and the next year I won a prize for the best commercial of the year. You think, if it's that easy, it can't be very good. And so, but what I'm trying to do is, in terms of the younger generation, if you talk about my researchers and so on, they are going turbocharged, because some of them start as young as 19, and you can see it. You can actually see how that person is growing, how people grow in self-confidence, how they get less angry, how they get less needy. It's a fascinating thing. And really, if any investors in the audience like to give me a few tens of millions to start a string of schools for QI, I really believe especially in this country, I think that's what we should do, as now we're an independent island nation, is change the educational system utterly so that we create a nation of geniuses in 15 years. I think we could do it. Oh, thank you. 10 million pounds, 20 million.
Okay.
Sold to the gentleman in the back.
Right. Okay. There was one more question. I could feel
But
that
no,
it's a good
Emma,
question.
I'm nowhere. I'm a hopeless person, but I'm working on it.
Sorry,
A fast question.
If you're life's work is to just challenge yourself and to get the best life you can be, at what point is it okay to say, do you know what, I'm happy where I am? At what point do you keep pushing yourself to a tortured base? Where's your acceptance that it's okay just to be where you are now? Or do you have to keep driving?
I don't, but again, the question is, what does success mean? And what success means to me is, do you not only love your family but like them? You know, do you have friends, 7 or 8 friends that you love and you do anything for? You know, do you have enough money? I mean, not having enough money is awful. Having too much, in my view, is equally bad for you. You know, the thing is, the more you give away, the more you give, the happier you'll be, I think. And so, talking about being a builder, some of the happiest people I know are craftsmen, you know, painters who turn up. They're easygoing people. The job is within their area of competence, but they don't make mistakes. And I, as an ex-builder, I love to see a bloke put in a window properly, you know, or paint a door, rub down a door well. You know, it's really good. And people should be told in life, you know, if you're going to, whatever you do, be the best at it you can be. You know, if you're a van driver, be the best, you know. If you're a policeman, do that properly. It's not about, well, what we think is that somebody, for some reason, a banker being paid 50 million a year is better than, you know, somebody who does your ironing. They're not better. And it's, as we know in this society, it's ridiculously unequal now. You know, when I was growing up in the 70s, the gearing between the lowest paid person in the company and the highest paid was about 1 to 14 or 15. It's now like 1 to 250. Does anybody need to earn that sort of money? You know, you may have laissez-faire views, or, you know, people should have a right to earn, but there's surely, what's Jeff Bezos, does he need all that money? I mean, it's just, that's the thing. There's something wrong with this. I don't know how to solve that because I'm not a very political person. It's like, I don't really sort of, again, I don't think politics is terribly relevant. I think it's much more important what we do, what we individually do.
Okay. On that note, lots of food for thought. Thank you, John. That was a fantastic session, and thank you for opening the festival with me.